Welcome to Leadership Beyond the Title podcast, where we redefine what it really means to lead. I'm your host, TaSheena Braxton, executive leadership and team coach, systems thinker, and champion for equity-driven leadership. This isn't your typical leadership podcast. Here, we go beyond job titles and performance metrics to explore how leadership shows up in the everyday, through relationships, values, decision-making, and the way we build systems that work for everyone. You'll hear real stories, unfiltered truths, and powerful insights that challenge the status quo. Because the world doesn't need more traditional leaders, it needs braver ones. So, let's dive in. Hello. So one of the things that I see most on teams in most industries, except maybe the K to 12 levels, is this fear about making mistakes. And it seems like the idea of making a mistake is somehow a death wish. And this stops all of us from experimenting and taking risks and just really putting ourselves out there to try something new. And so in today's episode, I want to talk about making mistakes. I want to talk about what it is and what it's not, and how to navigate through them without feeling like you are literally about to die. So if we take a step back and just kind of look at the big picture really quick, if you are a part of a team and you come from a marginalized background, there's this added pressure when making mistakes that feels absolutely heavier. So you may not be granted like the same runway, or you might not have the same long leash, as my husband would say, in order to make mistakes. And so any mistake that you make, any misstep, can be interpreted as proof that you're not ready for leadership, or you're not ready for stretch assignments, or even promotions. And so to me, it's no surprise that in team sessions, you may have a hesitation to speak up. You may have a hesitation to offer ideas. You may second guess yourself, or you may hesitate to share an opinion. Our broader cultural framework is rooted in what anti-racist educator Tima Okun terms white supremacy culture. So if you haven't seen that kind of list of all the different attributes of white supremacy and culture, I suggest you go Google it, and you will see this huge list that's so insightful for you to know what white supremacy culture is. But this culture amplifies pressure to be perfect. And so the traits like perfectionism, the belief that there's only one right way, or an obsession with just being flawless and just being on point all the time, are so deeply embedded in our workplaces and even in our culture, society at large. And they serve to uphold these power structures that tell us that we have to be perfect, we have to get it right, we have to do the right thing all the time, right? And so psychologically or mentally, emotionally, perfectionism, where we're always seeking that, can be something that is linked to intense self-criticism. So when you're talking about imposter syndrome and how that's something that you have to deal with, I want you to think and ask yourself, am I having this because there's some part of me that wants to be perfect all the time? This in turn adds to anxiety and even you to socially withdraw. So I had a live recently on LinkedIn with a great dear peer of mine's, Dr. Nicole, and we talked about imposter syndrome. And one of the things I kind of put out there was like, it's interesting that a lot of women of color or marginalized people typically say that they are introverts. And so, I've been sitting on it and I've been thinking about it, because introversion is a attribute of needing your alone time, needing to get your energy from being alone and refueling. But a lot of times we use that as also kind of like taking a step back, not wanting to engage, some people say they are shy and they use that, and that's completely wrong. It has nothing to do with being shy, but there's this quiet aspect of yourself that is different than someone who you'll see that's extroverted. And so I bring that up to say that sometimes, when we have this added pressure of being perfect, what happens is we may not engage socially right away because we want to make sure we're perfect. I know even for myself, like I like to kind of like assess the environment that I'm in, assess the people who are in it, so I know what are the culturally acceptable norms and ways of like engaging with this group before I go all the way in. And so that's something that can happen from this like pure idea of I need to be perfect. And when we are in these environments where, you have to be perfect, you have to look good, you have to get it right, a mistake doesn't just feel like a mistake. It doesn't feel like, oops, my bad, or I shouldn't have did that, or oops, wow, that was off. It can literally feel like it's the end of your career. But the problem with conflating kind of like I can trust you to be able to have more put on you or have more responsibilities with making a mistake is truly like something that we should not do. It's a flawed kind of perspective that we take, because genuine mistakes, when you acknowledge it, when you own it, doesn't have to erode the trust that you are capable, you do have potential, you can do more. I know in a lot of part of my career, especially as a Black woman, I used to, when I would make a mistake, it literally would mean like a leader would not allow me to do the next thing, or they would kind of take over. I vividly remember two leaders that I used to work with, and it would be like when I made the mistake, it was a huge problem. When my peer, who was maybe a white man or maybe a male, even of a different race, it was fine. Like it wasn't as big of a deal, but it was such a big deal for me that I think in many ways stalled my career in the long term. And not only did this leader kind of stop me from being able to do it, it would be like, oh, you need to do more. You need to show that you could do even better. Or, all of these things that was just like, it was a lot of BS. I would have another leader who would literally like just take over my ideas and just do it and not give me the opportunity to show and prove that I can do it, because they would be like, oh, she might make a mistake, so I'm just going to go take over. I'm just going to do it. It used to frustrate the hell out of me. But I know because those type of behaviors were happening, it made me more afraid to make a mistake. I had to show up perfect. And I'm going to talk about this later, but even in my perfectionism, it slows you down. And so now you're not moving as quickly as you need to. And so, of course, like leaders are looking at you like, I don't know if I can trust her with whatever it is, right? So if we go look at the data, one of my favorite researchers or reports that usually comes out every year is the McKinsey research from Lean In. And this research showed that 38% of women report being challenged or having their competence questioned, compared to 26% of men. And so we are being challenged, our ideas is being challenged, our competence is being questioned. Things like that are happening far too often that it does make us hesitate to like step out and do different things, right? And when things like this are happening to us as women of color in our society, where we are clearly being ostracized or othered when we make a mistake, we suffer so many health impacts that someone who is experiencing this has a heightened level of psychological distress, or lots more anxiety or depression, PTSD, or just a decreased sense of overall well-being. And so I would hesitate if I know that this was coming, right? If I knew that this was going to happen to me, and if you're listening right now, you're like, yeah, hell yeah, this has happened to me. We know why. And it's because Perfectionism has become the goal for us, and it's making us like a hamster in a hamster wheel where we are trying so hard to be so perfect, and it's just not sustainable whatsoever. I'll tell you that I personally am someone who runs away from mistakes. I am still working on those parts of me, so don't judge me. And sometimes it brings me to the inability to literally do certain things, like take me longer to create content, take me longer to talk to a team member, to share feedback, to all the things, because I feel like I have to be perfect in the way that I show up. And so mistakes is something that I want to get more comfortable with. I may be a little ahead of maybe the average listener that's listening today, but I am still working on those parts of me, depending on context, depending on the who, all depending on the stakes of a mistake. Like there's still parts of me that's working it out. If you were to ask my husband, he would tell you that I have a saying that I don't have to be right, but I don't absolutely not like to be wrong. And the way that this shows up is that I will not speak on things if there's a possibility of being wrong. I would just be like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to leave it to myself. Or I'm going to go over here and I'm going to investigate it. I'm going to make sure I get the right answer so that I am not wrong. Being wrong, making a mistake is so hard for me. And I just think as long as I stay quiet and I don't say anything, who cares if I'm right or not? So I'm just going to stay quiet. I'm not going to bring up this stuff. I'm going to leave it alone. But this absolutely makes risk harder for me. I procrastinate. I critique myself higher. And on teams, what I do is I find the 1 to 2 people that I can kind of be vulnerable with, right? Because I'm not going to go all the way. I'm not going to be all the way vulnerable, because, I'm not trying to make a mistake. I don't want nobody to see that side of me. So I'm going to just kind of be vulnerable, which is crazy. Because these are the people who I know will accept my mistakes. And because I am a woman of color, I know what it feels like to make a mistake. So I'm going to do all that I can do to prevent that. This year, I have been so busy with teams. And one of the things I noticed is the same energy that I have is that when we create a design alliance, so a design alliance is like a form of agreements or norms or ways that you want to be in relationship or ways you want to work with other people on your team. And someone is always bound to say they want to be open, they want to be okay with mistakes, and that's cool and all. But then when it really happens, when a mistake really happens, there's no acceptance. There is no grace. There is no openness. It seems like you are talking a good talk, but you're not walking that walk, right? And so it feels hard when it's not in agreement. It's not coming together. And so I have been thinking about mistakes and what a team needs to know to be okay with mistakes and to not let a mistake literally take them out. So the way that I like to look at mistakes is mistakes aren't failures. They are experiments. I remember scrolling on Instagram and I saw a reel from Rachel Rogers. She's a business coach. And she talked about this idea in her way. And she noticed how afraid business owners were to experiment. Yet in STEM fields, STEM meaning science, technology, engineering, and medicine, in the STEM fields, experimentation is the true foundation of all progress. So when a scientist runs an experiment and it fails, and I put that in quotes, fails, they don't call it a failure. They say, I learned something new. Go figure, right? So that's the mindset that I want you to start to adopt. What if your mistake was simply the result of trying something new or taking a different approach? Even if it wasn't intentional, it did give you very valuable information. What's coming to my mind is like, even when you date someone new or you have a new, spouse or partner or whatever, Like, when you go out there, you're kind of experimenting. And if it doesn't work out, you learn what not to look out for the next time, right? The same thing should be for our jobs. And you know, this is not the topic of this podcast, but what I know is like the golden handcuffs is a real thing. And sometimes people are cuffed even before they're a part of that organization. And so we fail and we're like, dang, like I shouldn't have picked this job, but we don't really take time to consider, like, you know, I failed, but it was an experiment. Life is an experiment. Trying new things is an experiment. You don't know what your tomorrow is going to bring. You don't know what your next hour is going to bring. It's an experiment and we learn. And once we start to reframe that learning, which in essence is a growth mindset, that's how we become better. That's how we start to find out more things, more information, and be lots more innovative and creative, right? And so I like to say, now that you know better, you do better, right? So I want y'all to do better. I want y'all to be comfortable with that. Research shows that companies with a strong culture of experimentation are 50% more likely to be market leaders in their industries. Apple is such a great example of this. Apple is always experimenting with new ways of bringing technology to the market, and they experiment. It is no wonder why you get so many freaking updates after you get a new iPhone. It's because they put something out there, they learn, they iterate, and they put it out there again. So they're learning, they're iterating. There's this cycle that they're going through, and they're like, let's try again, right? And just the level of like, oh my God, this is amazing that comes from that is so great. Can you imagine if Apple would have never tried to put out a phone? Like, what if they just stuck with computers and they didn't try the iPods? I remember the OG iPods, right? I might be dating myself, but iPods was a thing. Or they didn't try to do the phone, or they didn't try to do the iPads. Like, there's so much that experimentation helps us do and create, but sometimes we need to have the willingness to fail forward, to make the mistakes, because that is directly tied to our success. And here's what I want you to know. There is a danger, okay? Listen to me carefully. There is a danger when you avoid mistakes. It is going to keep you stuck in the status quo. And I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to be in the status quo. Well, you have to get comfortable with mistakes. And the status quo is not neutral. I want you to know that status quo is not neutral. It's often the very system that harms marginalized people the most. And so when we stay where we're at, because this is how we've always done it and this is how we're going to be, it harms us even more. And when we refuse to take risk, we play it safe. But safe can mean staying broke, burned out, or filled with so much regret as we watch other teams or organizations move ahead simply because they were willing to try. They were willing to do the thing that you're not doing. So here's another research item that I found. A McKinsey study found that organizations that encourage innovation and risk-taking see 22% higher employee engagement and significantly better long-term financial performance. So, y'all hear that? I mean, if you don't hear it, I hear it. Right? Let me say it for you. Avoiding mistakes doesn't just slow down individual growth, it holds entire teams and organizations back. So if you want a more engaged workforce, if you want better, strong financial performance, and you're getting an ROI on a lot of different things that you're doing, y'all, we need to be comfortable experimenting and trying different things and just really putting ourselves out there. Also, according to a McKinsey's Women in the Workplace report, this is from 2023, Women of color are significantly less likely to be given stretch assignments or leadership opportunities compared to their white peers. So that means that when mistakes happen, they are the ones that's often judged more harshly, and the margin for error is smaller. This is what I was talking about at the beginning. It's like your leash is not as long. So you don't have that much runway to be able to make the mistakes. And we know that as women of color, and we're watching and we're paying attention, right? But if you want an engaged workforce and you want me to be present, we got to switch this thing around and we have to do something new. So if you're a leader listening to this, it's important that you try different things and experiment. It is encouraged. It is valuable for your success. So if you pair that statistics with the fact that organizations that encourage innovation and risk taking see a 22% higher engagement, and you can see why experimentation isn't just optional. You could see that it becomes critical. Okay. So I've given you guys a lot of information, but now what I want to walk you through is what I like to call the mistake cycle. The mistake cycle is a 6-part process that helps you to realize that mistakes are natural. It's a part of the normal functioning of being a human being. And it's the different steps. I want you to become aware of what you're doing when you have a mistake. And I want to share it because once you see the cycle, you'll be able to pause, take a breath, feel more at ease when mistakes happen, and be able to even explain or describe to someone else where in the process you're going and where you're at. And then instead of feeling like it's the end of the road, you are always going to know there's a way through. It is not going to kill you. You're going to be all right. We going to be all right. So you're going to be all right. Okay. So let's walk through those 6 steps. So the first part of the mistake cycle is react. Okay. These are all of these are R's. Me and I don't have an accent, but sometimes y'all, I can't speak. Sometimes the way I say my words are different, but R. Okay. So the first part of the mistake cycle is react. This is the emotional response. And this is the point when you actually become aware that you even made a mistake. And sometimes these mistakes come as aha moments or oh shit moments or say what moments. So in other words, you might start to feel a little bit of surprise or shock or even speechless. And you might feel a sense of fear. And this fear shows up as like nervous, insecure, panic, worried. You might feel joy, which can feel like optimistic or optimism, amused, like, oh, wow, I can't believe I did that, right? Or even enthusiastic, like, oh my God, like what can this be telling me, right? And it's at this point when we start to notice that our instincts, our instinctual responses will bring up some of our triggers or our traumas sometimes. And we do this without even thinking. It's like just a natural part of what we're doing. And our reptilian brain starts to take over. All of our IQ, it drops. And then it brings us to this place of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And this could look like avoidance, people pleasing, or even trying to control this situation that isn't healthy. Right? And so this is the first part. You're just reacting. You're like, oh my God. Or, ooh, wow, that happened. Like, ooh, I can't believe I did this. Like, ooh, no. All of these responses are happening when you realize when you make a mistake, you're going to react. And that's the first part. The second part is reflect. So now I'm going to pause and I'm going to analyze. I'm going to think about what I did. I'm going to be thinking about all the steps, what happened. I'm thinking about what I could have done differently, what I could have did better. I think about Like, just all the things I'm really reflecting and analyzing. And there's no judgment here at all. There shouldn't be any judgment, but sometimes there is judgment. Sometimes there is judgment. And so I want you to be careful that you don't judge yourself at this point. Just pause and analyze and just think about, like, wow, okay. That's something to consider. That's something to think about. That's something to shift, something to change, right? So the second part, again, is reflect. You're going to reflect. We naturally do this. So once we react, there's like this instinctual reaction, and then we kind of pause and we're like, what happened? Right? And those can come together sometimes, but sometimes they're just like very different. Now, the third part is reframe. Now I'm going to shift my perspective or shift how I interpret it. This is the part where I just really, really, really suggest that you start to shift your perspective as seeing a mistake as an experiment. Like, wow, I did that. Okay, so now that was kind of like a test run, or I was trying something new, or okay, this is not my fault. It's not about me. Okay, like this was just like, a bump in the road. So now I am going to definitely like think about this as a learning moment, a learning lesson, an experiment. I'm thinking about it like that. I'm not thinking about it as something that's like detrimental to my career. And this point of reframing is so important because that's how you get rid of the judgment, the guilt, the criticism, all the things that make you feel worse than it makes you feel worse about who you are. Okay. So we don't want that to happen. So that point you need to reframe. So again, the first three: react, reflect, and reframe. Now the fourth thing: respond. Now I'm going to take action. I'm going to move forward. And I'm thinking about what should I be doing differently because of the interpretation I had, because of what I said about this mistake. So here we are more intentional. We're more thoughtful in how we're going to react. We choose what we will do rather than allowing our triggers or our traumas to lead the way. So when you respond, it's super important that you're kind of clear. And this is why even sometimes during arguments, I suggest in teams is like, take a pause, reflect, look at things differently. Let's see what it is. Let's consider something new. So we really want to do that because that is important for us in our careers, and it will help you going forward in your career as well. And then the fifth part is repair. You want to repair. This part comes only if harm was caused. So sometimes, if you are a researcher and you're in a STEM field and you're doing some research to find a new medicine, there may not be any harm that was caused. But say you are a kid on a playground and you actually hit your friend and they broke their arm. True story. This really happened to some classmates of my son's. That's a mistake, and you want to do some repair for the harm that you caused. And so here we are starting to fix the mistake. And this comes only if we are taking the time to pause and reflect and learn what we did. Learn and reflect on what we did. So this is going to be working with other people. You're going to co-create new solutions. You're going to find different ways of approaching things and new behaviors. And so you want to definitely repair if some harm was caused. And then the last is recover. There's a lot of emotional things that are happening inside your body, and there's a lot of things that are just like your nervous system gets deregulated whenever you make a mistake, because now you're in this reptilian brain moment of oh my God, this happened. You're going to need some time to recover. You're going to need some time to regain your confidence, to rebuild your momentum, to feel like you have a handle on it in some type of way. And so I want you just to make sure, take the time to recover, take the time to really come back to yourself so that you can go forward in your career, on your team, with your experiment, with your learnings, with whatever it is, So one, it doesn't happen again. You don't want to make the same mistake again. Two, you also want to be able to know how to pause and know how to catch it before it gets too far. And three, you just want to give your body space to really come back together and feel strong and prepared for the next thing. Okay. So again, the 6 steps are react, reflect, reframe, respond, repair, and recover. Okay. So in closing, I want to let you know that we are living in a society that kind of honors perfectionism. And until we start to undo those behaviors, undo those kind of systematically embedded approaches to work and how we show up, the more that we are able to be creative, innovative, supportive, and just receive what we need from other people in order to move ourselves in our careers. Not new careers, but it could be new, but to move forward in our careers. Because when we aren't able to share like, "Ooh, I made this mistake," how do we get better? How do we become somebody who understands, who looks like a person that's like, "Oh, she gets it. She's very like has high emotional intelligence, high IQ. She's very self-aware." Like, we want people to say those things to us. But when we get caught up in a mistake cycle where we either avoid the mistake completely, because in that cycle, you can also be the type of person that's like, "Ooh, I'm not going to even deal with it." That is a reaction. That is, okay? But we don't want to stay there. We want to move through the cycle to the point of recovery, so that we have better methods and better approaches for dealing with conflict, for dealing with, new changes that are happening in your organization, because it's important. We are in a heavy, just like, this society right now is all out of whack. There's so much freaking going on. And I want you to be ready, because you're going to make a mistake. There are going to be things where somebody's going to feel offended. There are going to be things where your triggers is going to cause you to say or do things that impact somebody else. And we have to know that it's not a death sentence. It's your ability to move through it, to acknowledge it. No, to see it, to acknowledge it, and to move forward. That's going to help you in the long run. And so I hope this episode was helpful for you. I hope that you start to see how the mistakes operate in your life, and in a way, bring this to your teams. Help them to see it. Help them to say, like, this is a part of our norms and our agreements. When we start seeing one of us in that cycle, we're going to call it out. We're going to make sure that this person understands that it's not the end of life. It's not the end of our team or your job. And we're going to work through it, and we're going to come together to co-create the solution for the way forward. And we're not going to do this by ourselves. Okay. So until next week, I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Thanks for listening to Leadership Beyond the Title podcast. If today's episode moved you, sparked a new idea, or challenge your perspective, share with a friend, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. But before you go, take a moment to reflect. What does leadership beyond the title mean to you? How are you already living it? And where might you lean in just a little bit more? And if you're ready to step into leadership that's rooted in your values, amplifies your voice, and positions you as the go-to leader in your field, check the show notes to learn how we can work together. Keep showing up, keep leading, just as you are, with leadership beyond the title.